We got people coming in, so we'll get it started here in a minute. $16 we got. Do you see more people? Do you see a waiting room, Andrew?
No waiting room. I'm showing 10 total attendees in addition to the 6 panelists. So we had 23 people registered. I think let's wait for a few more minutes here and let everybody else get logged in.
Okay. We haven't had our participant list go up for the last couple of minutes. Well, probably 30 seconds. So what we're going to do is go ahead and get started the webinar that you are joining today. First of all, welcome to see you all. Oh, I'm going to try to use my Swift to Swag box glasses. I don't know how this reading is going to go, so we'll see. But, oh, we got 2 more participants, 3. Good news, I can kind of stall a little bit. We've got workplace resiliency webinar, calming in critical moments. It's not gonna work. Calming in critical moments. The topics of discussion are what resiliency actually is and the benefits of integrating it into our lives. A little science behind just how this all works. Dr. Jeffs will be doing another one that he's got some science on, so stay tuned for that. It will be more to come later. Primary components of building resiliency, and the most importantly, how to prime ourselves for resiliency, how to practice resiliency, and how to build a culture of resiliency within our team. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Patrick Jeffs. Welcome and thank you for being part of our day. Dr. Jeffs founded the Resiliency Solution to help combat important impact of chronic stress in the workplace. Resiliency Solution believes chronic stress can negatively impact organizations by blocking creativity. That's probably 100% true. I don't know that I need science for that one, but I agree. Dr. Jeffs works with healthcare professionals, university professors and students, government officials, and many others to improve their day-to-day stress levels. They aim to enhance their organization's productivity, ultimately enabling these individuals and organizations to maximize their performance. As a resiliency consultant, trainer, and coach, Dr. Patrick Jeffs has spent the last 15 years working with individuals in both personal and professional capacities to increase their resilience and flow. Dr. Jeffs co-founded and served as the CFO of North Carolina Center for Resiliency. Did I get that right? Okay. PLLC. First, oh my, I should have read this first.
Somatically.
Somatically, thank you. I do know English. Base group psychotherapy in the Southeast in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, until it was sold in early 2020. So welcome. We just a little bit of housekeeping items. We had a discussion kind of in our pre-webinar run through that Dr. Jeffs, Patrick likes to see faces. So if we could all stay faces, not your name or your little shadow icon that comes onto the screen. Obviously, if you got an interruption, need to get up and step out for a moment, then obviously go on your, stop your video for a second and please mute yourselves. If you got questions, I don't know, you can tell people how you want them to do that. There's a raise hand function. You can unmute yourself or you can type in the chat. So, and at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our SWPTA president, Mr. Andrew Vidor.
Thanks, Darby. Welcome, everybody. I wanted to add a personal note about why Dr. Jeffs is here to talk with us today. About 6 months ago, the board put together a list of potential webinars as we continue this monthly series. And Darby Garcia brought up the idea of mental health. And I immediately thought of my good friend, Dr. Jeffs. Dr. Jeffs and I have known each other for almost 19 years. And his bio says a lot about his credentials and all of the things that make him capable to speak to this topic today. But Dr. Jeffs exhibits resiliency in every way, shape, and form in his life. Not only does he have an accredited career in this industry, but he has resiliency in his personal life and through the decisions he's made in his life. He is an athlete, and some might call him a junkie athlete, like most endurance athletes are. And when we talk about a junkie athlete, it's actually a positive thing. And endurance sports are something that is important for resiliency, and it takes a tremendous amount of resiliency and tenacity and perseverance to continue. Patrick right now is training for a 50-mile run this summer. Recently completed the rim to rim to rim trail run, which is not only one way but back, and has completed an Ironman triathlon. Now, an Ironman triathlon is a swim, a bike, and a run that totals 140.6 miles. When Patrick started training for Ironman, he had never ran more than a half marathon, which is a tremendous distance to go for in the first place. So he exhibits this in his daily life and speaks to this from the bottom of his heart, not just from his practice. So welcome, Dr. Jeffs, and welcome to this month's Swagbox sponsor, Passport. At the end of Patrick's webinar and presentation, Passport will share some words with us as well. So Dr. Jeffs, Pete, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Darby. Thanks to your organization for acknowledging the importance of this topic of building resiliency, acknowledging, either high level, mid-level, even low level mental health concerns that so many of us are facing. I'm certainly not immune to it. I'm human. I was born to a family, so I can study this all day long, but my lived experience also impacts me every day, and it impacts us all differently. So I hope to just shed a little bit of light on a topic that I could teach an entire semester-long course on. Yeah, you kind of gave me goosebumps there, Andrew. So thank you for that. A lot. So I'm reading the chat window as folks are sending this through about that maybe their mics and videos might not have an option there. I'm going to go probably 20, 25, 30 minutes, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. Feel free to send questions through the chat, and I can answer them either throughout or when there's time at the end, I can address all of those then. So I'm wondering if we can just take a minute with that chat. Resiliency was talked about a lot last year. I'm wondering if you all could just open up the chat window and what is the first word that pops into your mind, maybe based on last year, or maybe just the way that it shows up in our media or in your own life, but just put in a word or a phrase that kind of comes to mind when you think about resilience. Perspective, strength, perseverance, good. Toughness, tenacity, flexibility. Allison, that's a really good one. Darby, yes, adjustable. Availability, David, I really like availability. Endurance, absolutely. So one of the primary researchers in the resiliency world is actually based here out of North Carolina, and the primary clinical definition or research-based definition that we use is the ability to bounce back from negative emotional experiences and to basically adapt to the new changes based on the stress that's in front of us. And I'm sure that so many folks had to really pivot last year. And what we know is the more difficult or stressful a scenario is, sometimes the more difficult it is to be able to pivot or to stay present. So there's two primary ways we think about resilience, even given that definition. And one is kind of more based on this primary, which is what is our ability to bounce back, right? So what are the things that we need to keep within our life so that we can bounce back easier from that? And I'll pull up some of the science in a moment that says the more stressed out we are, the more chronic our stress condition is, which I would argue we were all under chronic stress condition last year. The less space we have to be able to move in when it comes to that. So that's one way. That bounce is certainly one way to think about that. And the other primary way to think about that is, what is our ability to build our capacity? So that, maybe we can even struggle with some of those same problems, same stressors, and it just doesn't impact us as much because we have a big range. Andrew had mentioned that, I'm a runner, endurance athlete. So if on a given day I can run, we'll say 10 miles, theoretically, if I went out and ran 2 miles, the stress of that running is really within my capacity. So that's not going to put undue stress on my system. But if I were to, if my daily running was 10 miles and then I had to go run 50, that's going to way exceed what my stress is. And I just use that as an analogy to think about how our daily stress goes. So if my daily stress fits within a window that's this big and I'm expected to perform way above that or have to get creative because everything is just changed in our outside world, there's going to be a really big gap. And I'm going to bring in some nervous system understanding. But just wanted to kind of point out two primary ways to think about the lens that is the resiliency. And then we need to think about kind of what goes into all of those different pieces. Some of the benefits to this resiliency is it increases our ability to be uncomfortable. So Andrew had mentioned that there's some sales folks on the call. And my background is actually in business. So Andrew and I went to undergrad together, and I actually studied industrial management with all these engineers. But sales was, a part of my job, and being uncomfortable. So the person that can be the most uncomfortable in sales can often win. So if we can expand being able to deal with these uncomfortable feelings, and I'm really talking about how do we feel uncomfortable in our body and how do we move through that in real time. That's one of the benefits of being resilient, but it's also an important way of how to think about being resilient is how can I stay present with really uncomfortable feelings and to be able to move through that without getting kind of forced out. The more resilient we are, the more connected we are to other people. And this is a chicken and egg scenario as well. And I'll show you kind of the 6 pillars that we work from within our model of resiliency. But if you can imagine someone who's always just frazzled or busy or stressed out, people will naturally just want to kind of lean away from those sorts of folks. And then the inverse can be true as well. So we can really increase our connection the more resilient we are, because people will want to be in relationship with us. And that's just a great way to move forward in life. It can reduce the amount of time that we're, quote, out, right? So if there was a major disappointment, so if we're, trying to close a deal with the city of Las Vegas for, a parking deck, that goes through, or that, does not go through for whatever reason, even if it was just a small hiccup in the whole system, instead of kind of crashing or being, going on a big drinking binge, or if the more resilient we are, the more that we can, sit with the disappointment and process this in real time, sit with the uncomfortability of maybe having to tell our boss, but to be able to just move through this, and to not have to kind of fall away or, like I said, be out. It helps us hold meaning to our work. So the more that I can be present with my work and really enjoy it, which is why I ask folks to keep their videos up, it's that connection can also help hold the meaning to work. The reason why we do this and really target folks in the workplace with this, and why a lot of people bring us in for big consulting agreements to do whole, I'm working with the Duke Health System and the Duke Cancer Center right now. I've been working with them for the last year. The reason that they really find this work valuable is because it transitions with their physicians and healthcare staff in between their work and life. So, just because they're learning this through the lens of their work, the way that our nervous system behaves when it comes to stress, that can transition into our home life as well. And they want their physicians to have a really good home life as well, so that when they come back to work the next day, they're feeling refreshed, they're able to sleep well, they can take care of themselves in really good ways. And lastly, all of this just protects against burnout. And so many of us chose our field quite intentionally. And, I find it so disappointing when, I find that people end up switching fields just because they're burnout, when some of these things could have been otherwise prevented. Next, I'm going to pull up what we call the 6 pillars of resiliency. So these are the 6 things. And I don't know if any of you have studied differences between lead and lag measures, but it's something that we're spending a lot of time. It comes out of some Franklin Covey 4 disciplines of execution work. And resiliency is actually a lag measure. So this is something that is merely an outcome of how we're living our daily life and how we're setting up our work-life balance in a lot of ways. So what I'm going to show you is kind of the introduction to the lead measures. And then we want to figure out, even within these 6 pillars, what are the activities that we can do that will help even hold these really solid. So the first one is self-awareness. Self-awareness is really, at any given point of your day, what is your ability to acknowledge, understand, be aware of your thoughts, your behaviors, your physiology, and which is really the most important piece of it all. Like, what is your internal workings? What does all of that feel like? And what we want to do is to be able to train ourselves that at any given point in the day, we can understand what that is, because when that is on board, then we can better meet our needs. So what does that look like in real time? With these physician groups, or there's another large consulting group I'm working with right now, we're having them start all of their meetings with 60 seconds worth of silence. And what that does is, kind of like today's webinar, everybody's coming from all these different places. And just to be able to have everybody come together, and it's really about that downshift. But the self-awareness, making space for that, says, how can we just, get rid of the outside world so I can even understand what's happening within me? Because, if I start my day and I'm just instantly checking email, I have lost the entire concept of what my needs are on a given day. And this is going to be a superpower moving forward if you have the ability to create a really healthy relationship with technology, your ability to focus, your ability to be creative. So the self-awareness is, do we have the ability to make time to train ourselves to do it, so that in any given moment we can get an assessment about that. So right now, my thinking, I actually feel really sharp right now. My physiology, my activation with that is a little buzzy, which is good, because I'm talking and I'm thinking and I'm engaging. That's the appropriate level to be at. I'm sitting still, but because my physiology is pretty activated in a healthy way again, there's some extra motion that is a reflection of that. So if that felt inappropriate at a time like this, I would just be able to kind of slow that down a little bit. But it's through that self-awareness that we're able to understand that. The linchpin of the whole deal, and we're going to talk more about this, is self-regulation. So self-regulation is really, what is our ability to change that in any given moment as well? So like I said, if I was feeling extra fidgety and for some reason that felt inappropriate, the self-regulation is, what do I need to change in my inner system to kind of shift that? Mental agility has to do with creativity and mental flexibility. So, you know, if something goes wrong, what is our ability to kind of stay in the game and to create creative solutions? And I'm sure folks had to really leverage this mental agility and really understanding that, you know, self-awareness and self-regulation being probably 80% of this whole resiliency model. If those are off, you know, those first two, that mental agility, it's going to be really difficult to be creative. Strength of character has to do with what is my ability to leverage my best skills when I'm needed or when those skills are needed, as opposed to I'm expected to give a presentation and I'm not the best person to be doing that because I'm afraid of public speaking to a fault. We want to be able to leverage the things that we're best at most often. Connection, what is our ability to build and maintain trusting relationships? And this shows up as much in our personal life as it is in our work life. You know, to get anything done, to complete anything, we really need to be connected to other people. And this works in kind of a duality sort of fashion where if we are really stressed out, we can reach out to others in that moment. And they can be able to support us, and likewise we can support others. And then lastly, optimism. Optimism is a twofold piece as well, which is one, how do we explain when good and bad things happen? And there's a great book by Dr. Martin Seligman who really developed a lot of this in the entire field of positive psychology. And the book was called Train to Optimism, and really sets up how do we explain when good and bad things happen, and really what types of optimism are required for each profession as well, right? So we actually don't want our finance folks to be overly optimistic, and yet we do want our sales folks to be overly optimistic. And similarly, probably our engineers, we actually want a little bit lower on the optimism scale. Because there's just a lot more at stake. Whereas, you know, somebody like myself in the mental health field, we want to be a little overly optimistic sometimes. That's the first half of optimism. The second is, how do we take that into our body, right? So just take ice cream, for example. Do we have the ability when we're eating ice cream to really savor that, to really take it in? And you can imagine the higher stress level we are, the more frenetic we might be in a given day, in a given moment. That's not really going to land within our system of like, oh, this tastes really good. And the reason that this is really important is the more that we can take in good things and really feel it, really appreciate it, the less external things we'll actually need to feel satisfied in our life. And that has a wonderful circular model as well. Andrew asked a great question. Are these pillars sequential? The 3 through 6 are not specifically sequential, but 1 and 2, if we could really focus on 1 and 2, that's 80% of the whole game. And then just, you know, pulling in these other pieces. I would say that with groups that I work with, or I do a lot of coaching for individuals as well. After the first 2 are kind of set, we spend time on the mental agility piece, so that creativity, and then optimism. Connection is just kind of woven in throughout all of it. And strength of character is a kind of a complex model. So we spend the least amount of attention generally on those sorts of things. But that's, yeah, pretty good question. So I do want to just spend the majority of our time really teasing out this concept of self-regulation, because it's really the linchpin, which is the whole scenario. So like I said, what is our ability to change how we're thinking and feeling? But it also has to do, what is our ability to contain the stress? So, you know, I actually felt great about coming in today, but I don't know if you've ever had either public speaking or, you know, a big sales pitch where, you know, in the days that you were leading up to it, you really felt the stress of that building throughout that whole time. Well, self-regulation says, what is my ability to actually turn that off until the moment I need it, right? So the amount of energy that I feel right now is a really good amount of energy. I were to really dial it back and just spend the next 30 minutes talking like this, people would fall asleep, right? So I need this amount of energy to think clearly. We need activation to learn as well and to deliver content, but I don't need that amount of energy in the days leading up to this. So to be able to change what we would call nervousness, some people would, it might raise to the level of anxiety. The self-regulation is, by instituting some of these principles, we can kind of shut that off until the moment that we actually need some of that energy. So that's a really important way to think about how the stress shows up in our life. Here's the science, and here's what, if you get nothing else from today, and I'll when I'm done, I'll drop a kind of a one-pager as well in the chat window that I'll have an outline on some of these things. But this is the crux of the whole deal right here. All of this is based on our autonomic nervous system, which is really about these activation and deactivation cycles. So if I could just run you all through a really quick exercise, if you could just pull your hands up, and here, let me shut off the screen. So what we're going to do is we're just going to introduce some energy into our hands, because this is the somatic work. So we're putting energy into the system, and then just notice what's different on the palm of your hands right now. See if you can track that. There might be some words that come to mind. There might be a temperature that's there. So that is what, yep, thanks Wade, feels fuzzy. So this is self-awareness now. Self-awareness says, can I track how this feels different? We're going to do it again. Warmer, thanks Donovan. We're going to do it again. So introducing energy. So this is the activation side of this. Okay. Now, as if I just hit a bell, see if you can track the energy leaving. Kind of like when you hit a bell and it's like ding, and then you listen to the hum as it leaves. So this is tracking the energy leaving. And this is really important, because when we think about when we're stressed, which is what resiliency is all about, we're really good at feeling the stress come in. We are terrible at feeling the stress going out. So that's the training system that needs to get on board, is what is my ability to track or even learn how the energy leaves. We're going to do it one more time, okay? So we're rubbing our hands together. And again, we're going to track the energy leaving. So whenever you're ready, so track the energy leaving and notice your breath. Sometimes it'll like really kick down. This is the whole deal right here. So what we just did, and you can take I do this all the time, like by myself, when I'm just feeling a lot, because I'm trying to externalize what I'm feeling internally. We went through these activation and deactivation cycles, and this is what resiliency is all about, which is how do we feel into healthy stress? Stress is not inherently bad. Stress actually gets our work done. Without deadlines, we actually wouldn't really get that much done. It's a healthy external driver, and we want a good balance of that, right? And even waking up in the morning, right? It's, stress, it takes energy to get out. Well, that's one side of our system. That's our sympathetic nervous system. And then there's the other side, which is the discharge, which is the parasympathetic nervous system. So what we just did with this hand exercise was feel into the charge of that, and then feel into the discharge of that, right? That energy was no longer needed. Just like at the end of the day, that energy is no longer needed. And we keep this artificially elevated through things like technology, media, caffeine, whatever, stimulants. And then at the end of the day, too often we bring in these parasympathetic pieces to try to bring us down. That's where alcohol comes in. We think that that's where things like television comes in, but that's generally really activating. So that's not helpful. So what does this really do with resilience? Well, there's this range in which, and I alluded to this before, there's a range that says, as long as I am operating within this general range, and all of our ranges are different and they're different on different days, I'm going to be okay. And we are absolutely designed to go above threshold. So 2 quick things. Above this threshold line right here is our fight, flight, freeze response. We don't want to live there, but when my 4-year-old loses her bike chain going down a hill, right, we are all designed to go over threshold to grab her, right? But then afterwards, I know that I need to be able to come back down, right? So once she's safe and all that energy, all that extra energy discharges. And I had mentioned the fight, flight, freeze response. Well, the freeze is where we were all at last year. And some of us might still be there, right? So the freeze response is we're hitting this gas, right? So this is the gas, and we're hitting the brake at the same time. And it's just like short circuiting and we do nothing, right? It's just like, so what that leads to is actually a big shutdown. And that's where so many of us were. So what we need to do is practice coming out of that by, these small activation and deactivation cycles. So this is what we want to be aware of when we're setting up our work life. It really setting up our life in general, because what chronic stress is I wake up in the morning, and from the moment I'm going, it is just full blast until it goes down at the end of the day. That's what chronic stress looks like. Well, when that happens, guess what happens to our range of resiliency? Boop, boop. So the next day, we get a little bit less because our body's like, man, you overdid it yesterday, so we're going to give you a little bit less. But then we have to artificially leverage that with things like caffeine, other stimulants like technology. And we try to artificially build that, and our body's like, nope, you did it again. I'm going to give you even less tomorrow. And that's when the consequences of this really start to come in. So that's just a little bit of that science. So what does it look like, or how do we even get there? So starting the day quietly, I had mentioned, how do we, with the self-awareness piece, how do we even begin that? So trying to come up with a morning ritual of some time. I have 2 kids, a 4-year-old and a 9-year-old. My wife, she was the CEO of our company. She's, she does her own remarkable things. I wake up at 4:30 every day because I just have to have quiet to start my day, to be able to figure out, how am I doing today? What do I need to be able to do? And there's a lot of different ways that we can get there. But one of the ways that we can prime ourselves for these activation and settling cycles is at least to start in this low thing. So whether that's with mindfulness exercises, I've started doing this Wim Hof breathing method this year, just as an experiment, who knows? But it's just a way to develop kind of a mindfulness morning practice. Connecting with others, right? So even when Andrew was talking, I felt like I could do almost anything just with him saying that, because of that confidence, because I really felt that connection. So starting our day or really integrating connection with others into our life can be really essential, and whatever that looks like in a time like this. And then back to the basics: sleep, nutrition, and exercise. You all can imagine that, the worse your diet is, the less your body is getting the components that it needs for your nervous system to work properly. If I'm not getting enough sleep, say I'm getting, 5.5 hours instead of 7.5 hours, that nervous system is not going to operate in the same ways that it needs to. So when I'm starting to feel these upper thresholds, right? When I'm starting to feel these upper thresholds, I'm not going to be able to say, I need to go take a walk for a minute. Like, I just got some bad news. Instead of me flying off the handle, let me just check this back. The more that we can stay in tune with these things, the more that we can pay attention to these activation. And similarly with the exercise, and I know I don't go overboard because I don't get hurt, but I really, play with this parasympathetic within my exercise world as well. So that's how we can prime ourselves, so that when difficult things happen, we at least have a chance to be able to do that. Likewise, what does this look like in real time? Well, taking better breaks throughout the day is something that we are not very good at, and I would really like to encourage people to think about. So if we think about what is the point of a break? Well, generally the point of a break is I'm at this really high level and I need something that is probably going to bring me down. Or like after this webinar, we've all been sitting here. I mean, I can't see a lot of other folks, but generally we've been sitting. So after this, we're going to need to do the opposite. So a break, so self-awareness, I've been sitting. What do I need? Oh, I need movement. So the opposite of is movement. So when we think about breaks, being more mindful or thoughtful, how do we want to feel after this break? So, if I take a break to check my email, that's probably going to make me feel like this. Or if I take a break to check the news, that's probably going to be an activating thing instead of a deactivating thing. The nasal breathing is just a way to really engage that parasympathetic and to really slow our system down. Focusing on the 5 senses, right? We feel the stress in our body. So one of the best ways to process that out is actually to feel our body more into, it wants to come back to homeostasis, right? To this more level threshold, really. So if we can pay attention to these other 5 senses, we're actually assessing for threat, right? And if I just even look around my room, it's like, oh, everything's okay right now. This feels a little intense. This feels a little bit better. I can just bring that down. Time with others we've talked about, and focusing on the body. Limiting multitasking and inputs is really essential, right? All of these things just come at us all day long, and it really pings our attention and our activation in all sorts of different ways. So really finding ways to limit that. I had a conversation this morning with a client, and he was saying just by closing all of his tabs to just be able to focus on one thing really just brought him down, really brought down his overall stress level. And also setting boundaries. So like for today, I just sent an away message saying, I have a webinar today and I will return emails. So it just took a little bit of pressure off. And there's all sorts of different ways that we can set boundaries to be able to take care of ourselves a little bit better, because we really are outwardly focused. And there's one last thing I want to leave you with. And this has to do with optimism. And this is really, there's a lot of really good research on this coming out of UPenn and Stanford and Duke. And it's just this 3 good things exercise. And all it requires is a dry erase marker. So I've adapted this based on kind of a Goodwill Hunting aspiration, where at the end of the day, you go on your bathroom mirror at home and you just write the words 3 good things, and then you number them 1 through 3. And then before you start your evening routine of, brushing your teeth, washing your face, whatever it is that might be, you just write up there 3 good things that happened in that day. So, before this one, it was, game night with family. And notice how specific some of these are as well. It's not just like mindfulness. I did a 10-minute meditation that day. That was great. And then you leave this up. So this is the last thing that theoretically you think about as you're going into bed. So what gratitude does in this way, and it's got to be 3, and it's only 3. If it goes to 7, we start thinking about how terrible our life is, and we don't want that. So it's got to be 3. But we go to bed with this parasympathetic thinking, oh man, this was pretty good. And then when we wake up the next day, this is the first thing that we see in the morning. So regardless of how we feel when we wake up, we can say, you know what? Yesterday was okay. So I bet today is going to be okay as well. The crux of the deal is before we leave for the day, so as we're doing our morning routines, we erase everything except for the words 3 good things and the numbers. And what this does is it primes our brain to start looking for good things. We are chronically habituated to looking for danger in the world right now. And a lot of that's really valid. So what we need to do is just balance this out a little bit. And this exercise is absolutely proven to do that, so that when we walk out of our house, there's at least some semblance of, when I see, some kids laughing, maybe that can put a smile on our face. Or, we have a lot of birds in North Carolina right now. Can I just orient to good things for just a moment and just not necessarily feel the weight on our world? This is a really good way to get there. So that's a cool 30 minutes. I'll hit pause right there. Obviously, we could do this for a while. And while, Andrew, I don't know if you want to run the questions department, but I think now would be a good time to kind of head over there. And while we're doing that, I'm also glad to I'll put something in the chat window as well. That'll kind of be a one-pager takeaway from a lot of this.
Yeah, if you have a question, there's a couple different ways that you can let us know. You can raise your hand and we'll unmute you. You can type your question in. You can say you have a question and we will call on you to ask it. There is a live question here from David Lieb. David, I'm going to allow you to talk. I'd like you to ask the question because I think this is a really good one and we'd like to hear it from you directly, please.
All right. Thanks, Andrew. So Dr. Jess, my question is, how do you help people realize their true window of resiliency? So I have a friend who's worked at a university for the past 30 years. He started in the mailroom, cliche, and has advanced consistently to significantly more responsible positions. But each successive job has always been just a little more stress than he could handle. So he's always frazzled. He could certainly handle the mailroom duties and he can handle the job he has now, but the threshold's always been a hair lower than his current level of stress. So with each increase in responsibility, he did ratchet up his ability to cope, just not quite enough. So it may be too late for me to help him before he retires, which will probably be stressful for him too. But my daughter shows similar traits and perhaps I can help her.
Yeah, and I think that's a good question. And kudos for your friend for pushing himself on one hand. I'm really curious, in moments like that, how they are attuning their life to the stress cycle, right? So if we are potentially over leveraged, that's when fear kicks in as well, and we can be too attuned to getting the job done and taking a break or taking a restful moment, even if it's 30 to 60 seconds to really check that stress down. That's probably the first place that I would start, because what happens is that stress just builds over the course of a day instead of feeling into it, checking it back a little bit, feeling into it, checking it back a little bit. So I'd be really curious. And I think we do, I don't know the age of your child, but I'd leverage this with my kids all the time. I find myself like asking them 3 questions in a row, which will then automatically overwhelm them. And that's like, oh crap, I did it again. So instead, I really have to slow it down, or even just noticing what high activation looks like in them, and just making sure that they are, getting the training that they need to be able to kind of deactivate, because, the world expects a lot of us right now. I have 2 girls and I am hyper aware of the threat and pressures that they will be under in their lifetime, and really try to spend a lot of time with what is their ability to find rest in the world. Because I think we put so much pressure on striving and achieving and don't train on that rest piece. And the trick to that, and this is where we need to just trust this, the more that we rest with stress, we can actually grow our capacity. So that's one of the things. Is that helpful? Is that David?
Yes, yeah.
Interesting.
Yes, thank you.
Helpful?
Yes, my daughter's mid-20s, by the way.
Okay.
Thanks, David. Good question. We'll move on to Wade Moore. Wade, I promoted you to be able to talk if you'd like. For those that don't know Wade, he is in charge of parking in Durango, Colorado. So Wade, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Sure. My question is really fairly simple to give advice to my officers, and that would be like, how often and how long should these breaks be in order to kind of structure that into their day? I think a lot of probably municipalities at least are structured with an 8-hour day and an hour lunch in the middle and 2 15-minute breaks at 2 hours at either end. And is that even enough, or should that be revisited?
2 things, Wade. One, shout out to Durango. My wife was the first baby born in Durango, Colorado, 1981. So we love Durango. Secondly, officers, police officers?
Parking officers.
Parking officers. So I don't think that the conversation needs to be on a longer lunch break or longer or additional 15-minute breaks. I say this to a lot of folks. It's not about volume, it's about quantity. So somebody can take an hour lunch break, and if they're watching a Netflix movie that entire time, that's not a good break. So what is the quality of our break? What activities are they participating in so that at the end of that, they actually feel some level of rested, right? So to close your eyes for 15 minutes on one of those breaks is a better break than an hour of watching Netflix on a lunch break, right? Additionally, we can train ourselves. And, when I do greater consults with folks, we train on what a 60-second break looks like. So, if we were to do this again, I might even start with 60 seconds to just really feel into kind of like that hand exercise of feeling the energy leave, just training ourselves to feel 60 seconds to come off of that. I do this when I'm pumping gas, right? I'll go to pump gas and then I'll walk 15 feet away from the word of the day or whatever the gas machine is trying to tell me to pay attention to. I'll walk over there and I'll bring my energy, or my orientation rather, into that external environment. And when we put it into our external environment, we're creating a distance between how we feel in our body, which is where we notice our stress, and something that might be a little bit more peaceful. And then we can just give ourselves a moment to rest, and really creating a culture of that as well. And Andrew, I'm going to send you the one pager. I'm not able to drop it into the chat window for some reason. So we'll get that to you all. But even starting meetings with 60 seconds of silence can be a really valuable way to start training the system. Just a quick 30-second. When I was working with Duke Oncology last fall, we trained them on these 60 seconds. So it started with, every time they started a meeting, there was 60 seconds. But what they really did was in the 60 seconds before they would meet with a cancer patient, they would do that same exercise. They would also do it in the 60 seconds after meeting. So they're just building in these activation and settling cycles within the entire course of their workday. So it's not about even more, but it's, how good can we get at really bringing that down? We train people on pulse oximeters, like the thing that you put on your finger that tells what your heart rate is. And we'll say, we're going to have a contest. So we do this at the end of the day. We're going to have a contest to see who can bring their heart rate down the lowest, because that's the skill, right? It's how quickly can I go, and fighters, certain fighters do. I don't work with a lot of fighters, but that would be a great goal for them as well, to really deactivate and then reactivate, right? It's not about taking the rest of the day off. Is that helpful?
That's helpful. Maybe a little comparison though, because you mentioned getting on Netflix, which videos got your eyes busy, your brain turned off, and your sound is coming. How do you relate that to people who maybe are listening to music, which is a whole different kind of body feeling, versus, again, somebody who might listen to sports talk radio, which in my opinion would half the time be firing me up as opposed to making me relax. But generally music is attractive, peaceful, even if it's your flavor's hard rock. It's just separating you from your day.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of music. I integrate it into a lot of my work. And so I would get really curious, and this could just be a fun work conversation as well, which is what types of music make you feel what different ways. So I rely on like cello classical music when I want to be creative. I listen to like high techno dance music right before maybe I'll go for a run, because that's a big stimulant boost, and more like kind of calming music at the end of the day. So I think as opposed to music or no music, just having this fun conversation about how different types of music makes you feel different. And I think that's a nice way to integrate a little bit of external stimulation into our day without it probably taking us into this high level threshold, because the stimulation is probably generally a little bit lower, as opposed to even the high thinking that can be involved with podcasts as well. I work with a lot of folks that really do a lot of podcasts, and that it really transports you to a different place, whereas music very often can enhance your ability to be present with the things around you.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
We have another question from Maria Soto. Maria's with the City of Las Vegas Convention Center and current Vice President of the Southwest Parking and Transportation Association.
Okay, so my question is, how do you address or help a coworker who has obviously gone off the deep end and stressed out? And it could be them bringing personal stuff to work with them and they're stressed out at work too. And they're just negative without causing a conflict between you and them.
That's a long conversation, Maria. But I think even just without getting into the management side of that, right? Because there's probably a management scenario. I noticed my brain putting my management hat on. But you could also, the benefit of a lot of this work and integrating this into teams is everybody gets to benefit from it. So even when I was doing this hand exercise, I was doing it for you all, but I was also able to appreciate this. So creating a culture of stress, even if maybe it was started because of one person, everybody can benefit from that as well. Take that, the 3 good things. So they've shown that is as helpful as an antidepressant, right? They're actually, they measure this and they're equal. However, this exercise, if you're not depressed, will actually elevate your mood the same as it would bring someone up that's depressed. So I think finding ways to integrate this into a total team can also not make them feel overly shameful, because something is probably really, so now I'm putting my mental health hat on, something is probably really going on in their life that needs to be addressed. And this is where the management piece comes on as well. But just creating a culture of it is probably the best thing, because to force someone or to single them out while also say that you care about them. I mean, do they know that they're cared about at this point?
I would hope that they know that. I mean, we talk to them on a regular basis, but sometimes it turns to negative and it's hard. Other people just remove themselves from it because they don't want to deal with it. And those of us that really care about the person have been trying to help them for a while.
Yeah, so they're probably, Maria, Andrew, do you have a way to send something to the group?
So what I'm going to do, Dr. Jeffs, is after the webinar, I'll email all of the attendees the information that you want to share. And if there's something specific that you want to share with Maria, I can give you her email address directly.
Yeah, let me, because I'll get this one pager to Andrew. I just threw my email in the chat window as well. Maria, I'm glad to hop on a short call. There's some nuance about this that a little bit of background would be helpful, but I'm glad to just hop on that call with you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's really hard. And, you know, my master's and my PhD were in counseling, and this is definitely signaling that there's something bigger going on. And there's interesting roles that we have as employers, and there's lines to that as well. So I recognize the difficult place that you're probably in. It sounds like you've been working on this for a while.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
One of the things that I thought of when you were talking about one of the clients that you're working with at maybe the Chapel Hill Health System is you want them to go home and have good kind of work-life balance. So when they come back to work, they're refreshed and recharged. You know, you're talking to us today clearly in a professional setting, but, you know, let's pretend that this was, you know, just a bunch of people that were joining a webinar that you were hosting outside of a professional organization. Do those strategies apply, you know, in having a good personal life and starting off your morning balanced and, you know, going in and producing well on a high level for your team, you know, vice versa? So it's not just performing well at work, but it's performing well at home?
Yeah, well, I had mentioned how early I wake up in the morning. And really that's so I can, my kids are phenomenal. And things come up sometimes, and sometimes their energy just comes up, right? 4 and 9. So if I can get right, and then I can make the morning right with my kids and go, oh, okay, that went mainly well. Then I'm gonna start my work day from a place of like, oh, that went manually well. And similarly, what is my ability at the end of the day? Say I had a hard work day. I recommend to a lot of people to like sit in your car for 60 seconds. I recommend this goes back to, I think it was it Wade that we were talking about music? What is the music that you want to listen to on the way home from work that will really deactivate you, so that I can create a transition, right? We don't give a lot of attention to transitions, but these activation and settling things, cycles, have to do with a lot of transition. So, as soon as we're even done with this meeting, how many of us are gonna instantly go to checking our email, some of us checking social media? We have to, like, instead of taking a 30 to 60 second transition, to just calm down before we do the other thing. And we can look to a lot of the transitions in our life and say, how well are we doing that? Because we also don't want to bring, say we have a home life with other people involved. We don't want to bring the stress of that into that environment as well, because we can turn that up as well. Did that answer your question, Andrew? Yeah, I love it. I mean, what a privilege I have to be able to live and study this. My wife does similar work as well, and it's still really hard. I mean, last year was really hard for us, and we live and breathe this all the time. We practice it with our kids, and it's still really difficult, but at least it gives us a shot. And that's what we're really hoping for.
Other questions for Dr. Jeffs?
I've got one. So obviously you're trained. Sounds like your wife is trained. So there's probably a lot of mellow in your house. But what if you're not trained and you're typically stress is up here? You know what I mean? You can do all of this stuff all day long, but how do you kind of continue to reinforce that in your daily life, especially if you're older and you've been living that way for a long time?
Yeah, two things. One, we do not live a mellow life in the slightest. It is action. We're just built as action people. What we do well is find moments to go, we're at that upper threshold, we got to bring it down. That's what we do as well as anything. This is, these activation and settling, I want to push myself to the highest level personally and professionally. So I want to be able to, push it really high. But when I notice that other upper threshold, to really be able to bring that back. What I would say, if I could begin to answer the question though, is, picking one or two moments throughout the day and say, I just want to get that better, right? So for me, I worked a really long time on my mornings. It's like, I need this really well-crafted morning. For a lot of folks, I work on their nighttime routine with them because they're on, hyper Netflix or on their, technology and just expect to fall asleep. So, just picking a moment or even a lunch break. It's like, there's this physician I work with over at Duke. He brings his lunch, he puts on these noise canceling headphones, really makes this like elaborate thing, puts on classical music, because we just picked like, what's one moment in your life that you just want to be a little bit different, and just practice there. And then once your body starts to recognize, this feels really nice, then you'll start to want more of that thing. In the same ways that we can become addicted to intensity, we can start to transition that to really feel what easing into the opposite of that is like. And our body's just like, oh, I want more of that. Did that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah. Addicted to intensity that was a resonator. So perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's real.
Would have been great for me to know 27 years ago when I became a parent, but hey, nothing like the present, right?
Nothing like the present.
Thank
And
you.
I'm a trauma therapist by training, and we can heal just about anything. So that's just a plug to say it's never too late to start on any of this. My grandmother lived to be 93 years old, and the change that she made in the last 2 years of her life was really profound. So I would argue all of us to just pick a moment and try to get it a little different. Thank you for having me, all. This has been really wonderful. Andrew, I'll make sure that you have all my contact. Darby, I think I have your email as well. I'll make sure that you have all that. Folks, don't feel hesitant to reach out. Daryl and Zach, it was nice to meet you as well. And good luck with all what you're doing.
Well, I'll tell you what, Darby, you know, when you brought this idea up, you know, we typically have technical webinars, right, on parking and transportation mobility. And what a great way to change the pace and to change our thought process in what we're going to do moving forward to be more resilient in our lives. So without this great idea, Darby, we wouldn't have had the opportunity to have Dr. Jeffs here today. There was a question about where can we get the information? I will email that to you. We also are recording this webinar. This will be great to share the video around with your staff. We'll make sure we get it posted on our YouTube page and website so you can link to that as well. Probably not until next week. Maria Soto, our VP and social media chair, is diligent about doing that. So as soon as we get this downloaded, we'll get it up on deck. Dr. Jeffs, thank you. Where could we find more information on this topic? Is there somewhere that we could portal to learn more if we're interested?
Yeah, I would just say email me and I'll ask a couple questions on how I could best tailor the information. What we do is pretty unique. We've really pulled together positive psychology, somatic psychology, and organizational behavior. And you know, we do a lot of trainings like this, have done a lot of Zoom work in the last year, but also we travel to really do consulting engagements with how to really create systemic change. What we're really trying to do is create systemic change in the workplace. So yeah, reach out.
Thank you very much.
Yep, my pleasure.
Well, I'd like to welcome Daryl Davis. Daryl is with Passport Parking, also in North Carolina. Daryl and Passport are our sponsors for this month's swag box. So some of the cool things that you got in the mail are thanks to Passport. He has a video to show us, so I will play that and then we can make sure to see if there's any questions. Darby, do me a favor. When I start this, let me know if you can hear the sound. Daryl or Darby, were you able to hear that?
No.
All right.
No, I didn't hear anything.
I need to share my sound too. All right. Let's try this again.
Hey everyone, it's a pleasure to be speaking with you all again at SWIFTA. I'm Daryl Davis, sales executive for Passport covering the Southwest. Also with me today is Zach Toomey, nationwide product sales consultant for Passport. And today we're going to give you a brief overview of the Passport operating system and what it solves for. Zach is going to be controlling the slides today. So if he messes up, blame it on him, but I'll also be giving him cues during the presentation. So just let you know so it doesn't seem weird. So next slide. The Passport operating system enables cities to seamlessly manage transactions and enforcement at the curb using one system. Next slide. So with Passport as your mobility partner, you get access to the Passport operating system and can manage parking, citations, permits, mobile payments, micromobility, all in one system. And this is a big deal not only for cities, but for end users. Next slide. We become accustomed to digital experiences. Typically, we expect them and prefer them, whether it's checking in for a flight or ordering a pizza or paying for parking. Digital is the way that we interact for services. Digital is continuing to expand into all facets of our daily interactions, and it's up to us as leaders to deliver digital experiences that are better and easier and build future-proof systems that enable us to adapt, grow, and scale. In addition, not only have we moved away from carrying coins and cash, today we are moving away from using public touchscreens which is causing a fundamental shift in how we interact with payment systems in public spaces. So going to the next slide. This change is happening in communities around the country and around the world. People are getting around in new and different ways. For example, uses of shared micromobility, scooters, bikes, etc., has been doubling year over year and was up to 84 million trips in 2018 and in the US alone. And the use of mobile payment apps is expected to reach 1 billion people this year worldwide. Combine that with the fact that more than 200 million people use mapping and navigation apps in the US each month, and there's a clear need and opportunity to provide a platform that enables people to pay for their new methods of mobility where, when, and how they find most convenient. Next slide. So while many city leaders are thinking about just controlling parking at the curb, at Passport, we're taking a more holistic approach to help you manage the interactions of all modes of transportation to create more livable and equitable communities. We're making a shift from curbside parking management to also considering the use of streets and sidewalks. So next slide. So at Passport, we see a new way to approach the challenge, right? We're committed to making solutions that make it easier for people in your community, as well as more effective for city leaders. So we believe that the solution is a new operating system to manage vehicle interactions with streets and sidewalks. And Passport is that operating system which city leaders can manage vehicle interactions now and moving forward. So I'm going to transition to Zach to give you a high-level overview of how this came about and a little bit more detail on how this works.
Thanks, Daryl. Hey, everyone. Zach Toomey here from Passport. Just as Daryl was saying, both parkers and cities and operators are looking for more ways to pay for parking and more payment options, and doing so from the devices that we all carry around in our pockets today. Now, we've seen this done before. Being able to have a multi-tenancy operation in the Netherlands, they call that the National Parker Register. John Van Dyke was a co-founder of that, and he actually was hired by Passport as an independent consultant to assist the Passport team in building out this operating system, teaching us some of what he learned that did work, what didn't work, and what needed to be changed here in the United States compared to the Netherlands. Now, the National Parker Register is in their 11th year, where they now have 22 ways to pay for parking from a mobile device. And across the entire country, they see 70% mobile payment utilization. Now, think about that. It's been around for 11 years. The iPhone has really become more popular in really like the last 8 years. So the iPhones and Androids and different ways to pay from your phone. So we expect in the United States to see mobile payment utilization skyrocket as we continue to add ways for cities and operators to have for paying to park. Now, the Passport operating system allows for more than just parking applications within it. You heard Daryl say that people want the ultimate choice. So we are bringing in other ways, other types of applications, which you can see across the top here, for parkers to be able to park and make life easier on them, and also give operators and cities the ability to give many different ways, similar to what the Netherlands offers in 22 ways, many different ways to accept parking payments. So the problem we're trying to solve is make the choice more convenient for parkers while not making life any more difficult for cities and operators by giving them one single source of truth, one view in the back end across many different applications. And here you can see some examples of those other applications that are maybe not parking applications, where we're bringing them in to be an option to pay for parking. And then on the right, you can see the who's next square or tile there. We are going to continue to bring on more partners this year, and there will be some exciting announcements to come in the near future about some of those partners. So with that being said, I'll kick it back over to Daryl to wrap us up.
Thanks, Zach. And that pretty much wraps it up for what we wanted to get over to you guys today. It's always a pleasure to speak to this group. I do have my contact information listed here. Would love to schedule a conversation to learn more about your city or organization, understand your needs, and see if Passport has the ability to help. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, Daryl and Zach. Appreciate that. Again, thank you for being a sponsor. Darby, I'm going to kick it back to you. and to Donna King if you have anything to add for future upcoming webinars.
Sure. I too would like to say thanks to Passport. The swag box was a big fight in this office. The socks are on a student, the lei is on a student, and the ring is might cause a seizure or something like that. However, that's been passed around all morning long.
Awesome. Shout out to Jamie for that.
So let me open up real quick.
Darby,
Okay,
I have it here. So our next
go for it.
month's webinar is going to be inhabited vehicles, presented by Christina Jones with Walker Consultants. So it's definitely going to be not to miss, and that is on April 21st. So we look forward to everyone joining us. And we also have our social networking event next week. So bring your jokes and arrive. And again, thank you so much for Passport this week, sponsoring this month.
And I'd like to add an additional thank you to Darby Garcia and Donna King. Darby and Donna are the reason that these webinars happen, and they go to great lengths to find good content and coordinate and schedule and produce the events. So if you've watched any of the last, say, 12 webinars almost since March of last year, these two women are to thank for their hard work and continued efforts. The webinar series started many years ago when the organization was founded, and Darby has been leading them since. So thank you for your continued and ongoing contributions, Darby. And with that, we'll wrap it up. Appreciate you joining us, and we'll see everybody next Thursday. Bring your parking jokes, because the one that I wrote that was included in the swag box was terrible to say the least. So finding a joke that's funnier than that should be relatively easy. So we're looking forward to seeing you all next week on Thursday. Have a good day.